Hi, Kellen Rouse. So this video is going to be about my second round of traumatic memory reprocessing using an EMDR. So in my last video, I talked about, for EMDR anyway, I talked about processing a time when I was denied food that I think is part of the problem with my disordered eating. And this time I chose to go a little more intense, and I chose to do one of my first memories of physical abuse. My primary abuser was my mother, which is pretty unfortunate for a young child because that's supposed to be your primary bond, the person who you're primarily bonded with, and obviously that causes a lot of problems later if that bond doesn't happen appropriately. So this memory was from when I was 6 years old, and in this particular instance, my mother was very angry at me. I'm not really sure why. I don't remember what I did that set her off. And I may not have even really done anything. She would just go off sometimes for no reason. But in this memory, she was holding me by my shoulders. Her face was, an inch in front of my face, and she's screaming in my face and shaking me violently by the shoulders. This is not the first memory I have of physical abuse, but the first one that I have, in that one I actually had some agency. I actually hit my mom back, and I know that sounds horrible, but it was the first time that I had found courage to take up for myself. I was actually also taking up for my little sister. So we decided not to mess with that one because I have some positive associations with it, and we decided to go with the second memory that I have, which I have no positive memory of, and which caused me a high degree of terror. So this one was pretty intense. So I went ahead and kind of wrote down a play-by-play when I got home, and that's about all I could handle. I did end up kind of having a crying jag for a little while when I got home, but this is several hours later. I just got back from yoga class, so I'm feeling a little more centered and ready to talk about how this particular session went. So again, the memory: I'm 6 years old. My mom is shaking me violently by the shoulders, back and forth like this, but very quickly and violently, and screaming in my face. So the negative association that still affects me today is that I can't trust my judgment. So that's where I started, is that I can't trust my judgment because I don't know why she's choosing to attack me at that time. I don't know what I've done, and that has manifested itself into me being very anxious that any little mistake I make, or even a totally unintentional mistake, will end in some sort of really over-the-top negative reaction toward me. And that is definitely an anxiety that I've dealt with for a long time, that I kind of walk on eggshells, especially around certain people, because I'm afraid of the blowback, because I feel like it will be disproportionate and possibly unexpected. So the negative association was I cannot trust my judgment. And so during the reprocessing, the first thing I did again is I had to have a visualization. The visualization again was my mother's face. So her in this case, her being very angry, being very close, and screaming in my face. And so this ended up being a very physical reprocessing, which makes a lot of sense because it, obviously, there's a level of emotional abuse when you're screaming in the face of a 6-year-old, but this was a very physical experience for me. And what I found out through this process is that I'm very much still holding it in my body although hopefully I was able to release some of it through this session and will in future sessions as well. So where I was really feeling this is the terror and the fear I'm feeling in my chest and in my solar plexus. But at the same time, I'm feeling tension and pain in between my shoulder blades, in my shoulders, and in my neck. And this is a place where I often have a lot of pain. I have had x-rays, there's no skeletal issue. My muscles are always extremely tense, and that tension causes a lot of pain. So I seem to be holding stress and likely very, very old trauma in my back and shoulders and neck, which kind of makes sense, right? Because it's like your spine, you're trying to like be courageous. So the first thing that started to really move around in my body was the sort of feeling of terror in the chest. And that was the first thing that came up. I did start crying when that came up, and, we would be, again, using the paddle. So, as I'm imagining any part of this reprocessing, the paddles are vibrating left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And then my therapist checks in with me, and now what are you feeling? And now what are you feeling? And then, and then stay with that feeling and then do the paddles again, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, until eventually that part worked itself up and out. Then I had to deal with my back and neck and shoulders, and it was really, actually I forgot about this part. During a couple of times during this process, my vision started to sketch, started to do this. And after we finished, my therapist said that was actually a flashback, is what was happening, that I was having a flashback to being shaken, because obviously when someone's shaking you, your vision looks like this. Okay, so I had this realization that made me sad, but also made me kind of proud of myself, that my back and my shoulders have been holding all of this for me to protect the rest of my body from this pain, and to maybe keep my brain from feeling all of it as well. And during the reprocessing, I did feel a great deal of gratitude for those muscles and the hard work that they've done and the strength that I've had to have in order to survive this, and not just this, lots and lots of other things as well. And I started to give those muscles permission to let go, and I felt like almost like they were fighting it, like they didn't want to let go. And so I just kept trying to work on giving those muscles permission to release, to let go, and to be okay. So eventually I was able to get to a very low level of pain. I did notice the pain flare up at first, so I don't know if it was that my muscles got very tense, or that part of the pain is just really psychosomatic, or some combination of the two, but definitely the pain flared up and then worked its way out. So once I was in a place where I wasn't crying and I was calm and I was relatively pain-free, and I was in a pretty good space, then it was time to replace the I cannot trust my judgment with I can trust my judgment. And at first that felt very, very untrue for me. And so, what my therapist asked me to do is to say those words in my head and then visualize again my mother screaming in my face. And that was overwhelming for me. I started crying again. My vision started shaking again. And sorry, my brain's a little fried. So we worked through that. And an interesting thing happened, actually. I suddenly had this very strong vision feeling, and I'm not like a vision quest, but you know what I mean? I could see a visualization of my adult self stepping in between my 6-year-old self and my mother, because I was not able to get to a place where I felt like I could trust my judgment with my mom's face in my face. And so what I did is I pushed her very far away. My adult self pushed her very, very far away to where I could barely see her, and completely muted her. So I could still see her face, and I could see her mouth moving, and I could see that she was angry, but she was very far away. She couldn't touch me, and I couldn't hear her. And then I imagined my adult self embracing my 6-year-old self and making myself feel safe. And that caused me also to cry, feeling bad for that little girl inside me who is so terrified that my adult self really did just have to step in, and protect myself. So eventually, once I was able to step in as an adult and embrace that, inner child, if you want to put it that way, and push my mom really far away and mute her, I was able to say with confidence that I can trust my judgment. I was able to get up to a really high level of confidence, feeling that when I was able to push my mother completely away from me. So I'm just trying to see if there are any other important things here. So I did have a little bit more pain come up when that happened, in my neck and back particularly, and I had to work on releasing that again. At one point I got a headache, and then I remembered that when my mom used to shake me like this, and this isn't something that only happened once, this is something that happened a lot of times, but when my mom would shake me like this, I could feel my brain like hitting my skull, like sloshing around in my head, and I got a headache for part of it. But eventually it all worked itself out. And so once I worked itself out, I regrounded myself, and I spent a little time meditating, sort of saying a mantra in my mind that I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And it was very intense. It was extremely exhausting. This was far more intense and exhausting than the last session. And when I came home, I ended up crying for a while, and it wasn't like a sad cry. It was like a release, like an emotional release. I needed an emotional release. I rested for a while, and then, like I said, I went to yoga class and tried to work it out a little bit. So that's where I am. I don't have another session like this for a while. Our next session is going to be a check-in and kind of what direction we want to go in. I'm thinking I'm probably going to stay with a couple of more instances of physical abuse that really stand out in my mind before I move into other kinds of abuse and also other abusers. So that's how everything went this time. As usual, please leave comments, questions. I'm happy to answer them, and have a great night.